All right, so I'm sitting here with Jeffrey Sackenheim and Brady Mick from SHP, one of Cincinnati's leading architectural firms. And we're talking a little bit about workplace design trends and the future of work. So I'd like to get started just by pointing out that a lot of companies, large, small, and lean, made the news recently because they've shifted either to a virtual first culture where everyone is reporting remotely, as Dropbox calls it, or they're adopting a hybrid work from home, work from work, a foot in each camp, so to speak, model. So I'm curious how this impacts some of the corporate design clients that SHP works with. How does this impact the kind of planning or strategic design recommendations you make to your clients?
Well, thank you for asking. I think it has a profound impact on the way we particularly are programming for our clients today. They are asking different questions, more profound questions than they were 8 months ago about their place. The conversation seems to have shifted from, having everybody in the house just because to, boy, we are seeing productivity for real happening as we are forced to distribute. So these conversations were going on before, but they're just much more robust now than they were, and a lot more questions about what we're going to do with it right now.
Jeffrey, how do you take some of those questions that Brady just referenced and turn them into something for your clients?
That's a great question, because I wish we had a crystal ball and we could project out a year from now or so, once folks have been vaccinated and human behaviors can start to go back to normal a little bit and it's safe to be together in larger groups. I think given the fact that we're in sort of an in-between period right now, we're trying to provide as much counsel as we can to our clients to understand how they were working before and what was working well for them and what was not working well for them. Put that through a filter and a series of layers of how we have been working, how they have been working for the last 9.5 months now. What have they learned during that period of time? We are working with folks actively who are planning their next real estate investment. And there are some folks, as you can imagine, on varying ends of the spectrum, some who are working under the assumption that, hey, what was working with us before was really positive, generally really good. And we just imagine that we're going to do that version in our next space. Might look a little bit different, but by and large, we're staying the course. We also have some clients on the opposite end of the spectrum that are saying, hey, we've learned a lot about our people and how they work and how they communicate and what's working well during this sort of accidental trial period we've been living under, that is directly going to inform how and what we're going to build in the future because of what it allows our people to do. I think those are the people that we're super excited to work with, because something is going to look different. I don't want to project exactly what's going to look different, but something is going to look different. So we're on a journey with them now of trying to, as best as we can, define what that might look like for their business. And that's for small businesses and large businesses and everybody in between. I think those are the organizations that will allow their people to continue to work from wherever is best for their situation, wherever they're most effective from. If that means they're in the office for team work, for community, for collaboration, and then they're working from home when they need a little bit more focused time, head down time, so be it.
Brady, to that end, I know you recently spoke with a friend whose company is shifting to that hybrid work from home part of the time, work from work part of the time model that Jeffrey just described. And in that conversation, you recalled that one of his colleagues estimated that their team, about 60 to 70% of their team, might need to, in his words, touch down in a physical office space occasionally, whether that was 1 to maybe 3 days per week. So their primary work location will still be at home, but they need that connection, that collaboration, that community, and that interaction that Jeffrey just kind of referenced. So one solve for how to use space efficiently and to encourage that kind of collaboration might be desk sharing or team neighborhoods. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of these concepts?
Yeah, there actually there's two things going on behind what's going on in that company, and I like what Jeffrey said a moment ago about we don't have the crystal ball, but what we do have is a mirror, and that mirror points to the way things were progressing already before the dramatic nature of this pandemic hit us and changed everything, sent everybody home. I think what happened at this particular company and many companies is that where previously workplace and workplace design and strategy was pretty low on leaders' radar. It was ubiquitous and people just had space, didn't they? And they were expected to be economical and show up and use that space. And suddenly the nature of workplaces moved up. Leadership's consciousness is very conscious right now, which is putting a new kind of pressure on how we plan for the workplace because once again, they see economic value. They see some value coming. Okay, we can have people work at home. There must be value in that. Our job and that particular conversation's job is to make sure the conversation stays on productivity and culture and not just savings. And that company was pretty mature, so they're already there. I think it's going to hit us in ways that we were looking at in the mirror. We were looking at it in the mirror 8 months ago. Why does everybody need an assigned seat when only 50% of the people are here? What's going on? What's wrong with this picture? The fear was that people weren't going to be able to be productive if you distributed them. That was the main cause. If they went home, I can't see them. I can't see them to take care of them or whatever I need to do as a manager. So there's going to be some profound impacts. We were already on our way to that. We were already on our way to those changes. So, we just got to take what we know and learn from it. Not everybody's made to work at home, are they? Not everybody's made to work in the office. So there's many questions behind that, Lauren, that I think we're going to grapple with in a very profound way.
Yeah, I think we're going to be really interested to follow those businesses that had what I'll say might be a knee-jerk reaction and proclaimed that you never, ever, ever have to go back to the office ever again, or we're divesting our real estate portfolio because we don't need space anymore. I would be willing to project that they're going to experience some cultural phenomenons in their organization that will cause them to rethink that position at some point in the maybe not so distant future. I think we as designers believe in the power of space and what it can mean to any type of an organization, and those that embrace the change and what they've learned over the last 8.5, 9 months and how that will allow their people to continue to work as best they can in the future are the ones that I think are going to be primed for success.
Jeffrey, you and Brady both have mentioned this idea of kind of site shedding, as I think of it, that reducing your total number of square footage, reducing your physical office space. You've also both touched on productivity and culture. So I assume that as you're thinking through all of this as designers, that they're kind of two sides of the same coin. Don't be so hasty to get rid of your physical office space because of the impact that can have on productivity and culture while people are physically in that space. So what kind of advice would you give to companies who maybe are thinking about reducing that total square footage as they're looking ahead to what's on the other side of this pandemic?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that a reduction in square footage is a bad thing. It might make sense for that business. What I think makes sense, and maybe an appropriate analogy would come from our engineers when they do a life cycle cost analysis for a client, where we're designing a facility for them and we're trying to help them make a really informed decision about a particular mechanical system, as an example. We can run simulations pretty definitively on the first cost of system A, B, or C, plus then extrapolate that data out over 30 years, a typical life cycle for a major piece of mechanical equipment. And we can identify operational efficiency and the amount of utility it's going to require, what operations and maintenance will be on an annualized basis. And we might be able to clearly demonstrate to that client that on day one, the most expensive system is actually your best choice, because over 30 years, if you're an owner operator, you're going to have less maintenance. It's going to be more operationally efficient. What I think we need to do to translate that to workplace is figure out how we can help our clients do a similar study on their people to determine how that will impact their space. What I'm really interested in, and I think I'm going to suggest that Brady agrees, is that the softer skills, the softer aspects of a business are the ones that are going to become all the more important than just if I can sit down and crunch numbers. I think that sense of community, that sense of culture, that sense of belonging, the ability to onboard people effectively, the ability to allow for people to learn in real time in their work when they're physically disconnected or have screens between them, as opposed to sitting near one another and overhearing a conversation and using that as an opportunity to ask a deeper question about why that particular thing is important to that particular company. I think those are the things that are probably suffering the greatest right now and will have a definite impact on a return to work scenario for any organization.
Well, just like I'm having to deal with right now in this interview, the amount of distraction that we can deal with is pretty higher than what was previously known. So what I'm going for, we can deal with this stuff and we can laugh about it now, where it was a pretty darn serious issue in the last 10 years, the amount of distraction in the workplace, rightfully so. But my point is that we have to go back with those customers who are asking about just shedding space, and we together need to come up with a new formula for productivity, a more robust formula. And Jeffrey is kind of flowering out that point, I believe, and talking about the idea of culture. And I guess we've been talking about it for a long time. How does space impact organizational culture? Without going into the weeds on that one, the question is much more robust, again, than just saying, I produce this amount of widgets in this amount of time at this amount of money. That's a traditional, even that comes into the learning culture, just rote and response type of activity that you can measure with numbers. We can't measure productivity that way anymore. We haven't been able to for a long time. So we got to talk about individual psychology, and we got to talk about team motivation, and we got to talk about cultural impact and belief systems and these, with pretty psychological and philosophical things at a light level. We can go deep with them, but just to answer the basic questions, everybody seems to be asking their people right now, how do you feel about working at home? Very, very prevalent. For the workplace of the future, I'm not sure that's an incredibly relevant question that our customers should asking. Our customers should be asking, what do we need as a group of people to produce results at the highest level possible? Part of that answer is definitely, we don't need everybody to be here. And that leads to the second question. Well, who needs to be here? Who doesn't, and why? That's a question worth digging into. That'll create new programs for the future.
So let's talk a little bit about company culture and how that reflects in what you do, because we've just spent a lot of time talking about the questions to ask and how we create and engage that sense of culture. In one of your recent client roundtables, one client, paraphrasing here, shared that the companies that are able to deal with their natural dysfunction appear to be the ones who are succeeding in this virtual first culture. So what does that statement mean to you, and how do you address that kind of feedback when you're considering how a company could, should, or would use space in the future?
Well, the first thing to understand is the nature of that particular company that made that statement. There's a couple of clarifying ways to understand that company. They're very mature. They are high-end professionals. They have a flat managing methodology, and their teams shake, rattle, and roll. They move around and change a lot. So they had to already develop the potential to, you might say, argue well, hey, I need this from you, and you need this from me, and there's an authenticity. Now, that's not saying that a company that's non-authentic can't ask these things. There's no such thing as a non-authentic company. It's just the idea that you must be able to interact with each other in any format needed. So in other words, if the only way that Jeffrey and I can work together is to sit side by side, then when we're apart, we must not be productive together. That's the assumption, right? I have to work with Jeffrey. Jeffrey needs me. So we do whatever it takes. There's a internal motivation to do whatever it takes to meet and connect and get the job done. So it is management light in that company that allows them to say, I don't know, I don't need to know where my people are. I just need to be able to reach them and get together, and they have the behaviors to do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm curious, Jeffrey, then to hear what your interpretation is of that statement. So the statement is that companies that are able to manage their dysfunction well are succeeding in this virtual environment that we've created out of necessity. What does that statement mean to you? How do you address that kind of feedback when you're considering how a client of SHP's could, should, or would use their space in the future?
That's such a loaded question, because I think we all know that if we're being honest with ourselves, there is dysfunction in everybody's business to one degree or another. And I think the ones that, to Brady's point, had embraced that dysfunction and were actively, continuously working to improve their business and their relationships within their business, those are the ones that are probably still thriving during the pandemic and will likely continue to thrive post-pandemic. The folks that did not have their house in order when the pandemic hit are probably the ones that are suffering the greatest right now. And whether that's because of their inability to quickly adapt to new technologies and new ways of communicating, or there's distrust amongst their people of not being able to monitor exactly what their folks are doing and that they don't trust that they can do their work away from the office. I think the businesses that are in tune with the good, bad, and the ugly about how they're operating, and they're willing to come to terms with that, and they're willing to share that information with us during a programming and design phase and a series of strategic workshops, if we can really get those businesses to be vulnerable and share, that's when the end product, the thing that we design and ultimately create for them, can have a real meaningful impact on their people and their business. If they're not willing to share and come on this journey with us, then probably won't be able to achieve as successful of a design as if the opposite were true. So I take it as we need folks to be willing to roll up their sleeves, take down their guard, take down their filters, really tell us at a very intimate level about their business and about their people. That can help inform then a really great, successful design in space.
Lauren, if I may, there's an interesting truth about the word dysfunction that we often forget. It sounds incredibly negative. It is when you put it under the umbrella of efficiency, business efficiency. That word efficiency, if it's dysfunctional, that usually means waste. Something's not going right. We're not producing as much as we can produce. You put that word under the idea of effectiveness or the experience of being in there, and out comes this idea that was previously hot and heavy, which was innovation. How do we solve problems, not only new problems in new ways, but old problems in new ways? How do we come up with things that we can't imagine yet? Or, dysfunction from that aspect is an incredibly positive way of coming up with innovation. Creative conflict is what that means. So that changes the behaviors of how we would think about a workplace. Previously and now, it's almost no difference. If we line people up in rows of cubes and pass papers down the line and call it done when it gets to the end of the line, efficiency is your measure. Whatever we can do with space to make that more efficient and eliminate that sort of dysfunction, we're good. If we're talking about bringing people together in ideation sessions, all these active work modes that we previously had in the workplace and are difficult to replace right now, active work modes, we can do one hell of a lot with a workplace design to accentuate those new behaviors. And it's not dysfunction anymore. It's effectiveness. That's a big shift. And particularly the level of traditional management, big shift in the way we think about managing people and design, creating design from that.
You both just talked about shifting the mentality from efficiency to effectiveness to innovation. And those are the kinds of questions and big philosophical questions that you get into in some of your design workshops and the charrettes that you host with your clients. So I wonder if you could take us through the vulnerabilities and some of the questions that you're asking that you're really challenging your clients to answer during those sessions. And what you get out of those sessions really does inform that final design, because it's so much more than just, here's the total number of square footage that we have. The restrooms are going to go here. The coffee station is going to go here. The big conference room is going to go over there in that corner.
Well, just pick one of those, Jeffrey. I mean, is coffee centralized or decentralized?
Exactly.
Go ahead. What do you think?
Is it on every floor or not? I would tell you the really interesting point for me is when we've gone through the workshops and we've had those really deep conversations, And we're not even really talking about space during those conversations, right? We're talking about high level ideals and what we refer to as design drivers. Then we do get to a point where we have a tangible drawing or a 3D model to share with a client, and it's been put through our interpretation of what that driver means in space. We take an idea, it gets formalized, and we put it back in front of the client. That's when the real conversation, in my opinion, starts to occur, because there's either, oh yeah, that's brilliant, that's exactly what we meant, and we can totally see ourselves working in there, or it's the exact opposite. We think we need way more private offices than what you're showing right now, as an example. And that's an easy one to pick on. And that's probably one of the most recurring ones that we hear when our clients talk about collaboration and communication and serendipitous learning, which could translate into a more open environment, less physical separation between people. So the real proof is when we get that reaction to the initial design concept to see if it's going to have merit and find its way into the final built solution. We always have those design drivers top of mind and at the beginning of every design review, but inevitably there's pressure that gets put on those the minute we put something in front of the client.
Lauren, we're trying to get to the truth, and that is often a very difficult thing to do. You can come up with very rational, on the wall reasons why private offices are not the best for productivity. Culture will trump productivity. Belief systems will trump culture. So if a single leader believes that, hey, space is a reward for people and a private space with a personal door, that's going to hit the program. I'm not even saying that's bad. I'm saying let's be honest and truthful about the purpose of that space so we know why we're creating something. What we do is going to last pretty long. It's going to last through the pandemic and beyond, and I mean, one of my key questions to customers when I talk to them right now is, is your space that's sitting on ice ready for your people to come back? What do you intend for that space to do when they come back? And that question is changing. The answer to that question is changing dramatically right now. And the answer is going to be no. That space is not ready for them to come back in very near future, we hope. 5-6 months maybe. So there's some stuff going on in there. It'll be interesting to watch. We need to help them prepare.
And if I can piggyback on that a little bit, we do have 2 clients that we're working with right now that have upcoming real estate decisions to make. Really looking out about probably 2 years from now when they would need new spaces to be operational for them. So they have a little bit of time to test some interim solutions. So if we think that they have about a year before we really need to put pedal to the metal on design decisions and geographic locations, they have some time to beta test in their respective locations. So whether that's furniture systems, whether that's tearing down walls, whether that's constructing new walls, whether that's building more physical Zoom rooms for people that might need to be in the office, but still connecting a lot with people that are outside of the office so as to limit acoustical disruptions to their neighbors. Those are all very valid things that right now they're going to be implementing in their existing locations and testing for about a year to see if any of those things make sense for them to consider adopting in their future spaces.
Zoom rooms, the idea, it's been there a long time. The idea of creating spaces to connect virtual team members with physical team members. However, previously that idea was the virtual people were out of sight, out of mind. They were halfway across the country, halfway around the world, or across the city. Doesn't matter. Now applying that idea to people who previously sat next to each other, it's just a trend. We need another 6 months and practice and tests, like Jeffrey suggested, to practice those behaviors and prove that, hey, they work with somebody halfway around the world. They can work, and they are working right now to a degree. It is working. Productivity is reported really high everywhere, and business numbers are backing it up. So sending everybody back to traditional conference rooms, traditional offices, and traditional workstations is just fraught with danger. It's going to be tough.
I agree. And I think I would go back to a point I made earlier where we've all had a taste of this now. And we know that certain elements of this work okay, whether it's just the personal choice of being able to control where I work from based upon my life situation, or if I have to pick kids up from school or whatever, that I have that real degree of flexibility that I think most businesses probably said you had pre-pandemic, but most definitely now that we've all had a taste of it, it's going to be really hard to give up. And I think that a lot of our folks that we work with, their people are feeling the same thing, that I kind of like certain elements of this type of work. And I'm not ready, nor do I want to go back to Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, 40 hours a week in the office on that fixed schedule.
Jeffrey hits an incredibly central point, and you illustrated it so well, Jeffrey, because there is a focus right now, and it's very Western in its principles, on the individual and the individual needs. The whole idea of well-being, particularly psychological well-being, that's been blogged about, for the last 4 months, since we hit the 6-month point of the shutdown. That is an individual driver. That's another one of the questions for our customers. It's changing the I to we. It's changing, how do we need to work more effectively? Just to round that out from what we talked about earlier, how do we see coming together? It's a dialogue. It's that massive shift that's gone on for the last 70 years between organizations as central hub of all behaviors. And we've been pushing towards individuals as having control, autonomy, self-determination. And what I need may be not what the company needs, not what the team needs. What I need may be in direct conflict with the team. It's going to center around space and management systems as well.
One of the things that you just said really struck me, and that's, we've been grappling with some of these changes for the last 70 to 80 years, this idea of changing from a very I-centered workplace environment to a we-centered workplace environment. And you've both touched on this in terms of how you ask questions of your customers, of your clients, as they're thinking about the space. So in many ways, the pandemic has really just accelerated a shift that was happening a lot more gradually. Are you finding that that's almost a knee-jerk reaction, or is it possible to take a very measured yet quick-moving approach to shifting from an I-focused culture to a we-focused culture? And is that something that your clients seem very open to doing?
It depends on which arm of the client you're talking about. Certainly, our real estate leaders that we work with have been asking these questions and are familiar with them. But when you take it up to, again, that leadership level, and they're not familiar with thinking about workplace in these terms, you have to slow down and tell a different story. There's some core principles of work that were the same now as they were before, that we can still ask the right questions and get to some conclusions to get these workplaces ready for people to come back and thrive, not just return to normal, thrive, actually move up a couple notches when they come back. Change management's in there, and certainly nature of design. It's all wrapped together right now as we breathe in and out and wait for what's next.
What else would you add to this conversation? What do you think is important for clients or future clients to know and to take away?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. I think if we're talking about organizations that allow their people to work from wherever, and they can work from home a couple of days a week and still do their job really well and really successfully across whatever metrics you want to monitor, I think we need to make sure that the spaces we create give people the reasons for wanting to come to the office. If I can do everything from here 100% of the time super well, why do I need to go to the office? What's going to be there that's going to make me want to come there? And every business and every client is probably going to have a slightly different answer. And so it's our job to help them figure out what that answer is and what it looks like and what it feels like and how it performs. I think that will be my parting comment.
And I would only add to that great thought that, in my opinion, to the world of workplace, there was an imbalance already in place before the pandemic between, as you pointed out early, Lauren, culture and productivity, two sides of the same coin. There was an imbalance towards whatever productivity was. We just got to make these spaces productive so people can get their work done. No problem with that. But imbalance to community and collaboration and innovation even. Right now, I think the pendulum has swung back. Boy, everybody's talking about culture. I just got to get my people back. It's destroying our culture. Okay, we need to just breathe in and breathe out. It's still a balance between productivity and culture that needs to be considered, not just a complete, gut swing to the other side. So, it's hard to make a decision right now, but yet at the same time, be brave. It looks like we're coming back. I want to hold on to that, don't you? Are we going to come back in exactly the same place? No, because as Jeffrey pointed out, the expectations are different. The experiences are different, but yet the spaces are still the same. That's like, moving on, growing up and becoming a college age student and then going home and you still got your elementary school bedroom. There's something wrong there. I think it could be that dramatic when we come back to the office. What, you mean I got to sit in my assigned cube all day to look productive? We know we can do it different. So we got to take advantage of, take a risk, be brave. We can help. We can help you make good, strong business decisions.
So completely reimagining existing spaces and future spaces for an unknown workforce with unknown answers to what does productivity mean? What does efficiency look like? What does effectiveness look like? How do we bring innovation? How do we keep our culture? How do we maintain our people and give them a space that they want to come to? That's a really small, simple little ask of design, isn't it? How fun though.
Bring it on. Bring it. Boy, if somebody were asking all those questions right now, what we could do with them, Jeffrey. Wow.
Yeah, that gets me excited.
Well, that's a great place to wrap up. So thank you both so much for your time, and hopefully we can connect on this again soon.